Most people assume that feeling constantly tired comes down to poor sleep, getting older, or just dealing with too much stress. But what if that's not actually the root of the problem? What if your fatigue has very little to do with how much energy your body is producing and everything to do with what your body is failing to clean up? Let me paint you a picture. Inside every single cell in your body, you have thousands of tiny structures called mitochondria. Think of them as microscopic power plants, constantly generating the energy that keeps your brain sharp, your muscles moving, and your organs functioning. Now imagine this. What if a large portion of those power plants weren't just underperforming, but actually broken, leaking energy instead of producing it, creating more damage than fuel? Because that's exactly what happens. Here's the part most people never hear. Your body has a built-in system designed to find these weak, damaged mitochondria and remove them. But in modern life, that system is almost completely switched off. And when it shuts down, everything starts to decline. Your energy drops, your thinking slows, and even your body's ability to repair itself begins to weaken. There is, however, one ancient metabolic trigger that can turn this system back on. And when it does, everything begins to change. And this is where things start to get interesting. You wake up in the morning, and instead of feeling restored, you already feel behind. You slept a full night, maybe even 7 or 8 hours, but your body doesn't feel recharged. Your mind feels foggy before the day has even begun, like you're trying to think through a layer of static. As the day moves on, things don't really improve. By mid-afternoon, that familiar crash hits. Your energy dips, your focus slips, and you find yourself reaching for something, coffee, sugar, anything, just to stay functional. But it's not just about feeling tired. You start noticing other subtle changes. Workouts that used to feel energizing now take longer to recover from. Small aches linger a little longer than they should. There's this low-level inflammation that seems to hang around in the background. Focusing deeply becomes harder. Your attention drifts more easily. Even your mood feels less stable. Small things irritate you more than they used to, or your motivation just isn't there some days. And then there's your metabolism. Weight that was once easy to manage now feels stubborn, like your body isn't responding the same way, no matter how consistent you try to be. And that's the most frustrating part, isn't it? You're not ignoring your health. You're making better food choices. You're trying to improve your sleep. You might even be exercising regularly. On paper, you're doing what you're supposed to do, yet something still feels off, like your body isn't cooperating the way it used to. Most people look at this and assume it's just aging, or stress, or hormones starting to shift. And while those factors do play a role, they're often just surface-level explanations, because underneath all of this, something deeper may be happening, at the level of your cells. A quiet, gradual breakdown that doesn't announce itself loudly, but slowly drains your energy from the inside out. I want to share something I've seen over and over again in my clinical work. I'm Dr. Leon Hartwell, and across years of working with patients, there's a pattern that becomes impossible to ignore once you know what to look for. Two individuals walk in, similar age, similar routines, even similar diets on the surface, but their bodies tell completely different stories. One of them feels sharp, energized, they recover quickly, think clearly, and seem resilient. Like their system adapts well to stress and bounces back without much effort. The other, they're doing many of the same things, but they're constantly fatigued. Their recovery is slower, small issues linger, and over time, you can see this gradual decline starting to take shape. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you look deeper, it's not just about calories, it's not just about how often they exercise, it's not even fully explained by sleep quality. The real difference shows up at the cellular level. I've worked with individuals who have tried everything you can imagine, supplements, strict diet protocols, structured fitness programs, and yet, despite all that effort, something never quite shifted for them. Until we addressed one specific internal process, a process most people have never even heard of, but it plays a central role in how your body produces energy, how it cleans itself internally, and even how it activates repair systems like stem cells. And once that process is reactivated, something changes. Not always overnight, but steadily, predictably. Energy begins to stabilize, recovery improves, the body starts responding again, and over time, those small shifts become something much more profound. So what's actually driving all of this? Why does your body start to feel like it's running on low power, even when, on the surface, you're doing everything right? Here's the shift in perspective that changes everything. Fatigue is not always about your body failing to produce enough energy. In many cases, it's the opposite. It's about your body holding on to energy systems that are no longer working properly, systems that should have been cleared out, but weren't. You see, your body is constantly renewing itself. At the cellular level, there's an ongoing cycle of building, breaking down, and recycling components to keep everything functioning efficiently. Mitochondria are part of that cycle. They're created, they perform, and over time they wear down. That's normal. What's not normal is when that recycling system slows down. Because when it does, those old, inefficient mitochondria don't just sit there quietly. They start to accumulate. And instead of producing clean, usable energy, they begin to leak, generating stress signals, inflammation, and subtle dysfunction that spreads throughout the system. So now, instead of powering your body forward, they're quietly pulling it backward. And this is where a very specific process becomes critical. It's called mitophagy, a built-in cellular cleanup mechanism designed to identify and remove those damaged mitochondria before they cause harm. But the real question is, what actually turns this system on? And just as importantly, what causes it to shut down in the first place? To really understand what's happening, we need to simplify the biology, because once you see this clearly, everything else starts to make sense. Think of mitochondria as tiny batteries inside your cells. Their job is actually very straightforward. They take the nutrients you eat, combine them with oxygen, and convert that into usable energy, what we call ATP. That's the energy your body relies on for everything, from thinking and moving to repairing itself. But here's the part most people are never told. Mitochondria are not permanent structures. They don't just sit there working perfectly forever. Over time, they get damaged, they lose efficiency, and as they wear down, they start producing more waste and less usable energy. It's a natural process, which is why your body evolved a system to deal with it. The easiest way to understand this is to imagine a factory. In any well-functioning factory, there's always a quality control department. Its job is to inspect the machinery, identify anything that's no longer working properly, and remove it before it slows down the entire operation. In your body, that quality control system is called mitophagy. It's responsible for identifying weak or damaged mitochondria, breaking them down, and clearing them out. And once that happens, your body replaces them with newer, more efficient mitochondria. So it's not just about removing the bad, it's about making room for better. Now think about what that means in real life. If this system is working well, your cells stay clean and efficient. Energy production remains stable, your body adapts, repairs, and performs the way it's supposed to. But if that system slows down, those damaged mitochondria begin to accumulate, and instead of helping you, they start dragging everything down, reducing energy output, increasing internal stress, and interfering with how your body functions on a day-to-day basis. And here's the real problem. In modern lifestyles, this cleanup system rarely gets activated the way it was designed to, which means for many people that internal factory is slowly filling up with inefficient, worn-out machinery without ever being properly cleared. Now, when that cleanup system finally gets activated, several powerful shifts begin to happen inside your body, almost like flipping a metabolic switch from survival mode into repair mode. The first is the activation of mitophagy itself. When your body senses a specific type of metabolic stress, particularly the kind created during periods without constant food intake, it begins to prioritize cleanup. Damaged mitochondria are no longer ignored. They're identified, broken down, and removed with precision. And when that happens, something subtle but powerful occurs. The internal noise inside your cells starts to quiet down. Energy production becomes more efficient, not because you're making more energy, but because you've removed the systems that were wasting it. At the same time, another important shift takes place at the signaling level. Your body activates something called AMPK. Think of this as your internal repair switch turning on. And in parallel, a pathway known as mTOR begins to dial down. Now, why does that matter? Because mTOR is heavily involved in growth and building. And while growth is important, constant growth without cleanup creates problems. By temporarily lowering that signal, your body creates space to repair, instead of just continuously building on top of damaged foundations. Then there's oxidative stress. Damaged mitochondria tend to leak unstable molecules, free radicals, that create internal stress and inflammation. Over time, that can affect everything from your energy levels to how well your cells function. But when those damaged mitochondria are removed, that source of stress is reduced at its root. Inflammation begins to settle. Cellular environments become more stable. And finally, after the cleanup phase, your body doesn't just stop there. It begins to rebuild. This process is called mitochondrial biogenesis. Essentially, your body starts producing new, stronger, more efficient mitochondria to replace the ones that were removed. The result? Energy production becomes more stable. Your cells become more resilient, and your system starts functioning with a level of efficiency that many people haven't felt in years. Now, here's where this becomes even more important, because these processes don't happen in isolation. They tend to reinforce each other in loops, and unfortunately, many people get stuck in the wrong kind of loop. It often starts with damaged mitochondria. As these mitochondria become less efficient, they begin to produce more oxidative stress, these unstable molecules that create internal wear and tear. That stress doesn't just stay contained, it starts damaging nearby mitochondria as well. So now you have a ripple effect. More damage leads to more dysfunction. Energy production drops further. And as your cells struggle to keep up, you begin to feel it. Fatigue becomes more noticeable, more persistent. And when you feel fatigued, what naturally happens? You move less, you exercise less, your overall activity declines. That, in turn, worsens your metabolic health, which feeds right back into the cycle, making mitochondrial function even weaker over time. It's a slow, reinforcing loop that quietly pulls your energy downward. There's another loop happening at the same time, and this one is driven by modern eating patterns. When you're constantly eating, frequent meals, snacks, late-night calories, your body remains in a continuous fed state. That means mTOR, the growth signal we talked about earlier, stays constantly active. And while that might sound like a good thing, it comes at a cost. Because when mTOR is always on, the body never fully shifts into cleanup mode. There's no pause, no window for repair. So instead of clearing out damaged components, your system keeps building on top of them. Over time, that leads to an accumulation of cellular waste, especially those inefficient mitochondria we've been talking about. Now, here's where the shift happens. Fasting interrupts both of these cycles. It creates a deliberate pause in the system, a metabolic break from constant input. And in that pause, your body finally gets the signal it's been waiting for, to stop building and start repairing, to clear out what's no longer working, and reset the system from within. When you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the effects of this cellular cleanup go far beyond just feeling more energetic. Because mitochondria are not isolated units, they influence almost every major system in your body. When mitochondrial function begins to improve, the first thing people often notice is a stabilization in energy. Not the short spikes you get from caffeine, but a more steady, consistent baseline, less crashing, less fluctuation. Your body feels more reliable throughout the day instead of constantly swinging between highs and lows. And then there's the brain. Your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in your body. So when mitochondrial efficiency improves, mental clarity often follows. People describe it as thinking more clearly, reacting more quickly, and experiencing less of that mental fog that used to linger in the background. Metabolism also becomes more flexible. Instead of struggling to switch between fuel sources, your body starts adapting more smoothly depending on what's available. That flexibility is a sign of improved cellular efficiency, not just calorie balance. At the same time, inflammation levels tend to decrease, because once damaged mitochondria are removed, one of the major internal sources of stress is reduced. The body is no longer constantly reacting to its own dysfunction. But here's where things get even more interesting. Stem cells, the body's internal repair system, don't operate well in chaotic environments. They thrive in conditions where inflammation is low, stress signals are controlled, and cellular waste is minimal. So when mitophagy clears out damaged mitochondria and reduces internal stress, it creates a much more favorable environment for these stem cells to function. In that state, stem cells can activate more efficiently, they can respond more effectively to damage, and they can support tissue repair in a more organized, predictable way. This is why mitochondrial health is so closely tied to long-term outcomes like aging, recovery speed, and overall resilience. Because when the cellular environment is clean and efficient, the entire system doesn't just perform better in the moment, it maintains its ability to repair and regenerate over time. Now, the important question becomes, why does this system break down in the first place for so many people? Because when you look closely at modern habits, you start to see a clear pattern. a lot of everyday behaviors are unintentionally working against the very processes your body relies on for repair and energy balance. Take constant snacking, for example. Every time you eat, your body shifts into a fed state. That's normal, but when you're eating or grazing throughout the day, your system never fully transitions out of that state. There's no real metabolic switching, and without that switch, deeper cleanup processes don't get properly activated. Then there's diet quality. Ultra-processed foods create a different kind of burden inside the cell. They don't just provide fuel, they also increase mitochondrial stress. Over time, this can accelerate wear and tear, making the cleanup demand even higher, while the system responsible for it is already underperforming. Sleep is another major factor. A lot of people underestimate this, but deep sleep is one of the most important repair windows your body has. When sleep is poor or inconsistent, those nightly recovery cycles become less effective. That means damaged components that should have been cleared or repaired often remain unresolved. Chronic stress adds another layer. When stress hormones stay elevated for long periods, they disrupt the signaling balance that regulates repair, energy production, and cellular maintenance. The body stays in a reactive state instead of a restorative one. And finally, there's inactivity. A sedentary lifestyle reduces mitochondrial turnover. Your cells adapt to low demand by scaling down both energy production and renewal processes, which further slows down the entire system over time. When you put all of this together, a clear picture emerges. Modern life is often defined by constant input, constant eating, constant stimulation, constant stress, without enough periods of true biological pause. And without those pauses, the cleanup systems your body depends on don't get the chance to fully activate. Over time, that imbalance quietly shifts your entire energy landscape. Now the question becomes, how do you actually begin to support this system in a practical, realistic way? And the key is not extreme intervention, it's structured metabolic rhythm. Let's start with fasting. A simple entry point is a 12 to 14-hour fasting window. This is often achievable just by adjusting when you eat dinner and when you have your first meal the next day. At this level, your body begins to experience a gentle shift away from constant digestion and into mild repair signaling. As your system adapts, many people progress to 16 to 18 hours. This is where the metabolic switch becomes more noticeable. You begin extending the period where insulin stays low, and that creates more space for processes like mitophagy to gradually activate. For some individuals, occasional longer fasts of 24 to 48 hours can deepen this effect, not as a daily practice, but as an infrequent reset that gives the body a more extended cleanup window. During fasting, what you consume matters as well. Clean fasting, meaning water, black coffee, or plain tea, works because it maintains the low insulin, low signaling environment your body needs to shift into repair mode. Anything that significantly stimulates digestion can interrupt that state. Support becomes important too, especially electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. These don't break the fasting state, but they help maintain cellular stability, nerve function, and energy balance while your body is adjusting to lower food intake. Then comes refeeding, which is just as critical as the fast itself. After a fasting period, your body is in a highly responsive state. Prioritizing protein provides the raw materials needed for rebuilding tissues and supporting mitochondrial renewal. Healthy fats help stabilize energy and reduce metabolic spikes. At the same time, avoiding ultra-processed foods prevents reintroducing the same stressors you were just clearing out. The reason this works is simple. Fasting creates the signal for cleanup. Clean fasting protects that signal. Electrolytes maintain function during the process, and proper refeeding ensures that when your body rebuilds, it does so with higher quality inputs. Together, it's not just about restriction, it's about creating a rhythm where your body can finally cycle between stress, cleanup, and repair the way it was originally designed to do. Now, even though this system can be powerful, a lot of people misunderstand how to use it, and that's usually where the problems begin. One of the most common mistakes is fasting, but then overeating low-quality, ultra-processed foods afterward. What happens in that case is simple. Yes, you may trigger some level of metabolic switching during the fast, but then you immediately reintroduce the same cellular stressors you were trying to reduce. It's like cleaning a room and then throwing everything back in right away. The net benefit becomes minimal. Another major issue is starting too aggressively. Some people hear about fasting and immediately jump into long 24 or 48-hour fasts without preparation, but the body doesn't respond well to abrupt stress without adaptation. Instead of improving energy, this can increase fatigue, stress hormones, and make the entire experience unsustainable. Then there's something often overlooked: electrolytes. When people fast, they sometimes forget that water alone isn't always enough. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium play essential roles in nerve signaling, hydration balance, and cellular function. Without them, you may feel headaches, dizziness, or unnecessary fatigue that has nothing to do with the fasting process itself. Another mistake is expecting instant results. This is where many people lose patience. They expect dramatic changes after a single fast or a few days of adjustment. But mitochondrial repair and cellular cleanup are gradual processes. The body doesn't rebuild its internal systems overnight. It responds in layers, over time. And perhaps the biggest misconception of all is psychological, treating fasting as punishment instead of strategy. When fasting becomes something you endure rather than a biological tool you're using to support repair, stress levels rise. And that stress can actually counteract some of the very benefits you're trying to achieve. The most effective approach is not intensity, it's consistency and respect for the process. Because when done correctly, this isn't about deprivation. It's about giving your body structured windows where it can finally do what it's been designed to do all along: clean, repair, and reset itself from within. Now, when we zoom out and look at the timeline of change, it becomes clear that the body doesn't transform overnight. It adapts in layers, step by step. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, the most noticeable shift is usually internal adjustment. Hunger signals begin to stabilize as your body learns a new rhythm. Some people also report a subtle improvement in mental clarity, not dramatic, but enough to notice that the fog starts to lift slightly at certain points in the day. This is your system beginning to adapt to a different energy pattern. By weeks 3 to 6, the changes tend to become more consistent. Energy stops feeling as chaotic. Instead of sharp highs and crashes, there's often a more stable baseline forming. People frequently describe this phase as feeling more even, less dependent on constant external fuel just to function. As you move into the 2 to 3 month range, the adaptations go deeper. This is where metabolic flexibility often becomes more noticeable. Your body starts to switch between fuel sources more efficiently, and recovery after stress, whether physical or mental, can begin to feel smoother and more reliable. It's not just about energy anymore, it's about resilience. And in the longer term, the changes become more foundational. This is where improved cellular efficiency, better repair cycles, and more balanced energy regulation can contribute to a broader sense of resilience. People often describe feeling more robust in daily life. Not just less tired, but more capable of handling stress, recovery, and aging-related changes with greater stability. The key point is this: these shifts are cumulative. Each phase builds on the one before it. Nothing happens in isolation. Your body is constantly adapting its internal systems based on repeated patterns over time. And when those patterns consistently support repair instead of overload, the trajectory of how you age and how you feel day to day can gradually begin to shift in a meaningful direction. Here's something important to understand as we bring all of this together. Your body is not broken. In fact, it has been running highly complex repair and maintenance systems your entire life, quietly in the background, without you ever needing to consciously control them. Processes like mitochondrial cleanup, energy regulation, and cellular renewal are not inventions or external tools. They are built-in biological intelligence. Mitophagy is a perfect example of this. It's not something you have to add to your body. It's not a supplement, a hack, or a foreign mechanism you're trying to force into action. It's already there. What changes is whether your lifestyle allows it to activate properly. Because in many modern conditions, these systems don't disappear. They simply become underused. They sit in a kind of low-activity state, waiting for the right signals to turn back on. And this is where the real hope lies. You don't need extreme interventions to begin shifting this process. Even small, consistent fasting windows can start to send a very clear message to your biology that it's safe to step out of constant processing mode and return to repair mode. Over time, that signal can help reactivate pathways that may have been dormant or understimulated for years. And when that happens, the body doesn't need to be forced into healing. It begins to reorganize itself naturally, restoring balance, improving efficiency, and gradually rebuilding resilience from within. The most powerful takeaway is this: your system already knows what to do. The goal is not to control it, but to create the conditions where it can finally do what it has always been designed to do. When you step back from all the mechanisms, all the biology, all the technical language, a much simpler truth starts to emerge. Health is not really about adding more and more things to your life. More supplements, more protocols, more routines, more complexity. In many cases, it's actually the opposite. It's about removing the interference that prevents your body from doing what it already knows how to do. Because at its core, your biology is not confused. It's not random. It is deeply organized, intelligent, and adaptive. It evolved over millions of years to survive periods of scarcity, stress, movement, and rest in a very natural rhythm. The problem is that modern life constantly disrupts that rhythm. And so the question becomes less about what else do I need to add, and more about what is blocking the system from functioning properly. From that perspective, fasting is completely redefined. It is not punishment. It is not deprivation. And it is not about suffering or restriction. It is communication, a signal to your biology that the constant influx has paused and that it's safe to shift attention inward, to repair, to clean, to restore. In that window, your body isn't being forced into a new state. It's being given permission to return to an ancient one. And that changes everything, because you are no longer fighting your biology or trying to override it with willpower or external inputs. Instead, you are aligning with it. You're not forcing change onto the system. You're removing the noise so the system can express itself the way it was always designed to function. And when that shift happens, health stops feeling like something you chase. It starts feeling like something that naturally reemerges when interference is taken away. Let's bring everything together clearly. At the core of what we've been discussing, the problem is not simply low energy in the way most people think about it. Instead, it's often the accumulation of damaged, inefficient mitochondria inside your cells. These are the structures responsible for producing energy, and when they stop functioning properly, they don't just become useless. They actively contribute to internal stress, inflammation, and reduced efficiency. Over time, this buildup can quietly affect how you feel day to day, your energy, your focus, your recovery, and even how resilient your body feels under stress. The solution, however, is already built into your biology. It's a process called mitophagy, the body's internal quality control system that identifies and removes these damaged mitochondria, making space for newer, more efficient ones. And one of the most powerful natural triggers for this process is fasting. When you create periods without constant food intake, your body shifts its internal signaling. It moves away from constant growth and digestion and begins to prioritize repair, cleanup, and renewal at the cellular level. When this system is supported, the effects tend to cascade outward. Energy becomes more stable because your cells are functioning more efficiently. Internal stress begins to decrease as sources of dysfunction are cleared out, and deeper repair systems, like stem cell activity, can operate in a cleaner, more balanced environment. So at its simplest level, the problem is damaged mitochondrial buildup. The solution is mitophagy activation, and one of the most accessible triggers is structured fasting. When these elements align, the body doesn't just feel temporarily better, it begins to function in a more efficient, resilient, and self-repairing way over time. If this changed the way you think about fatigue and energy, then you're already starting to see your body through a completely different lens. And that shift matters more than anything else. Because once you understand what's happening at the cellular level, you stop chasing quick fixes and you start recognizing patterns that actually drive long-term change. So if you want to go deeper into this kind of biology, make sure you stay connected. There's a lot more to uncover, especially when we start breaking down the differences between autophagy and mitophagy, and why those distinctions actually matter more than most people realize. We can also go further into how stem cell activity is influenced not just by fasting, but by what happens during the refeeding phase afterward, when your body is most responsive to rebuilding. And finally, there's something called metabolic flexibility, your body's ability to shift smoothly between fuel sources that plays a much bigger role in energy stability than most people ever hear about. But here's what's really interesting. There's another phase in this process that almost everyone overlooks completely, and in many ways, It might be even more important than the fasting window itself. Because what you do after the fast doesn't just end the process, it helps determine the quality of the reset, and that's exactly where things start to get even more powerful.